Okay, so today we're going to talk about property taxes. And first thing we're going to orientate you to is the timeline. So the tax year begins on July 1 and ends on June 30th. And it's broken up into two 6-month periods, the first and the second, with January 1 being right in the middle of the year. The first half of taxes are due in November. Now, we don't get the bill until like September, and it's due all the way back from July through the end of the year. Now, if you're impounding your taxes, meaning that you're going to pay it monthly with your mortgage payment, then your lender is going to pay your taxes. However, you really still want to understand how taxes are calculated. It is your money, even though the lender is going to pay for it, and they will not cover supplemental taxes. So still stay tuned here for this information. So taxes are generally due November 1st, and then for the second half, they're due on February 1st. You'll also see delinquent dates here, so they won't start charging you interest, and it's a 10% penalty if you pay after this date, December 10th for the first half, April 10th for the second half. Your lender will absolutely make sure if you're impounding taxes, they will absolutely make sure that they pay them on time. However, if you're paying them, if you pay even one day past the 10th, it will be a 10% penalty. Now, things are not linear here. It's our government at work. So you can see that that delinquency date is just 20 days before the end of that 6-month period. Whereas here in the second half, it's due April 10th, where the tax year ends on June 30th. So that has a lot to do with how impounds are calculated, and we can go over that in another video. So let's talk about how property taxes are calculated. I'm going to bring up a sample tax bill and then show you what a supplemental bill looks like. So this homeowner has owned it for a really long time. So your taxes are always based on a net taxable value, and that they arbitrarily determine what's the difference between the land and the improvements up here up top. If this is going to be owner occupied, if you're going to live in the house yourself, then you're allowed to take $7,000 off of their assessed value. The assessed value, this number is going to start as your purchase price. And then if you're living in it, you can take $7,000 off of it to come up with a net taxable value. This person has owned this house since the 60s, and so they have a very low net taxable value, and we'll talk more about that. So your taxes are broken up into 3 categories. The first 2 are based on this net taxable value. The first is all of us pay 1% on that amount. So 1% of this net taxable value gets to the annual amount that's due. That's section 1. Section 2 are voter approved bonds. So when we go to the ballot box and we say that we want X percentage for schools or fire stations or whatever, this is how it gets charged. So here you'll see in the past here are all these additional bonds that have been passed by the citizens, and they get charged on property taxes. So it is a percentage based. So this is 0.00950% of this net taxable value per year. So $10.55 per year for this specific bond. And it goes on and on, of course. So you can roll all the way down to this total percentage right here, and this is pretty common, 1.17432%. That's assuming you have no Mello-Roos. That is the percentage of your net taxable value that your taxes are based on. Your third section is your fixed charge assessments. So these are fixed amounts that everybody will pay regardless of the value of their property. So $5 a year for vector disease control, $10 a year for CWA water availability, etc. This total amount, 1303, plus these fixed amounts come up with a total bill of 1300. Don't we all wish? But this is a great example to also show you how supplemental taxes are due. So this $1,333.36 gets broken up into those 2 halves. The first half, Well, I guess this year the 10th must have fallen on a Saturday because it's delinquent as of the 12th, and the second half is due as of that April 10 deadline, both combining to 1333. So next we will talk about supplemental taxes because, of course, anytime the market is going up, your sellers are going to have a lower taxable value than you do. In a down market, it's the opposite. So next we'll talk about supplemental taxes. So when this tax bill got produced, which as you might remember, it's going to come out here in like September, they make the assessment as of July 1. They actually start on it earlier, but the tax year starts July 1. And so they had no idea that you were going to be buying the house. Might not have even known the seller was going to sell. And so at some point during the year, the property changes hands from the seller to you. And the county had obviously no way of knowing that. And so they produced a bill based on the seller's taxable value, right? Well, at some point after let's just say you were closing in March. So the seller is going to pay for all the taxes from July to March, and you're going to pay them from March to the end of the year. Great. The taxes that are due are based on the bill coming out. And so the taxes that are due are going to be based on the seller's, probably in most cases, lower amount. At some point, the county is going to say, oh, the property changed hands, and you owe us the difference between your net taxable value and the seller's net taxable value for the period of time of when you purchased it to the end of the tax year. Very fair. If you are impounding taxes, however, your lender may think that they don't have the money to pay that. We'll talk more about that one-on-one if you like. And actually, I've attached a copy of your current seller's tax bill and what I think your supplemental bill is going to be. But here's an example for this person who's owned this property for a really long period of time. If this property were to be closed, you close and you get the keys on November 30th, and the purchase price was $725. And remember, this seller had a very low, they'd owned it for 60 years, had a very low amount. Obviously, there's going to be a huge delta between the two. And so that's going to come due probably 4 to 6 months after you purchase. And so in this case, the property taxes, the supplemental bill that will be due is $42.05. Again, happy to go through this in more detail, but at the end of the day, your taxes will always be based on your purchase price on the same percentage that the seller has been paying, this 1.17. It's just that they got the seller's amount up until closing amount, and then they need the difference between your assessed value and the seller's assessed value for the period of time between close of escrow and the end of the tax year. Happy to answer any questions. Let me know how I can help. Bye-bye.